I'm Frank Vaughn, and it is November 21st, 2025. And the glue, the thing that allows a nation or a country, because those two things are not the same thing, to hold itself together in the face of calamity and crisis, whether economic, whether war, is common, shared ethnic, cultural, and institutional ties that stretch back for generations. That there is something in the shared experience that links you now in your current time to your forefathers, your father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather, a legacy that is passed down. Now, Canada has embraced, for the last several decades, official multiculturalism, and this has introduced cracks into our system. Instead of this great melting pot, people and cultures collect together in groupings, and they don't intermingle. They don't adopt common shared heritages and cultural practices. But these fractures existed before the mass immigration experiment began. And the thing that holds the whole project together is a certain degree of economic prosperity. When you remove that economic prosperity, those fractures grow. They become fissures. They divide provinces and regions against each other. Now, in this video, I'm going to speak in general terms. This isn't going to apply to everybody that I'm speaking of, but I just want to have a conversation, so please don't be so sensitive. At the core of Canada, we have long had a parasite that steers our national politics, yet offers nothing back to the rest of the country, and in fact, is Canada's voluntary participant. First reading. We've heard a lot about Alberta lately and how bad Alberta is, and we'll get to that coverage. But I want to talk about the double standard when it comes to Quebec. Again, first reading. Quebec's little notice plan to unilaterally declare independence. Top story by Tristan Hopper. With Quebec Premier François Legault staring down humiliating defeat at the hands of separatist Parti Québécois, his government has pursued a radical plan to simply declare de facto independence before the next election. You'd think this would be big time news. But let's check. Let's just see how big this news actually is. Heading over to CBC. Ukraine. Most important thing we've got here. Number one article, why Canada is winning the travel trade war with the United States. Pure propaganda. God damn that orange man in the south. Two in critical condition after grizzly bear attacks involving students in Bella Cola. Officials, I don't know where Bella Cola is, but they probably wish they had a shotgun on them, but we can't have that. It's all about Ukraine. It's not about the impending crisis of unity that we face right here at home in Canada. The named Quebec National Assembly, the name tells you everything you need to know. Why people haven't understood that this country can be ripped apart at any time without a referendum. You see, the two referendums that we had, just to cover this, were unnecessary political operations that Quebec, again, put the country through, and the country didn't even get to vote in that referendum because we all know what would have happened. Everybody would have told Quebec to go and pound sand, and we already would have broke the thing up. But instead, we went through this process, and through this process, we were blackmailed into a whole pile more concessions to keep the volunteer participant in Confederation. Not even in Confederation, just participating in it. But we'll get to that because this article never mentions, I've read it a couple times now, never mentions the key thing. The Quebec National Assembly is currently reviewing a proposed Quebec Constitution, which would declare the province a free national state, unbeholden to the crown, and able to ignore Ottawa at will. Think about the reaction that we have been given by the mainstream media to Alberta talking about just having a referendum, not a binding question, a referendum on sovereignty. Everybody's gone into a full court press to suppress this notion in Alberta, to even have a discussion. I would argue that Danielle Smith is slow rolling the thing, and we'll talk about that next, but totally different reaction. No other parliament or government may reduce the powers, authority, sovereignty, or legitimacy of the National Assembly, speaking of Quebec, or impose constraint on the democratic will of the Quebec people to determine its own future. They're basically saying, we're going to write our own laws. This before the sovereignists trounce the ruling party in the next election. In fact, the proposed constitution effectively treats Canada as a loosely defined currency union, actively stating that its status as a sovereign country is illegitimate. Well, it kind of is. And instead of drawing this out, I'll get you to the key point. Quebec never signed the Constitution. They never signed on the Confederation. They participate on a volunteer basis. And we have bent ourselves over backwards to keep them voluntary. I don't know why. I don't know why we do so much to keep them participating in a volunteer way, because they don't do anything for us. They take the tax dollars of Canada and they suck it away in welfare. They've done very well for themselves, something to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. They don't develop their own national, as they see themselves, national wealth, which is the resources under their own feet. All of those are kept intact for the day that they leave the country, and then they will make themselves rich off the bank account of the resources under their feet. Rather, Canada is defined as, quote, an association of autonomous states founded on the sharing of the state function and state jurisdiction between two orders of government that are equal and not subordinate to one another, undercutting federal power. There are any number of reasons why this new Quebec Constitution would violate federal law. The most obvious one is that Canada's own constitution is pretty clear that Ottawa retains supreme authority over provincial legislatures. This includes the power of disallowance. Although disallowance hasn't been used since 1943, it allows the federal government to simply quash any provincial statute it deems to be an encroachment of central authority. That sucks on its own. Look, this video is not a defense of Canada. I've been very clear in my video work that the system of Canada, the institutions that we have, requiring a high degree of honor to function properly, our Senate, which is appointed basically for life until a senator is 75, our legislature, which we elect, that then appoints the government, with the most powerful official in the country being the governor general, not the prime minister. The situation sucks. The courts are captured. The whole thing, we literally have a prime minister right now who is making decisions that are beneficial to Brookfield and to his portfolio. It's happening in real time. It's happening before our eyes. And there's a good chunk of the Canadian population that is so propagandized and so hypnotized that they're willing to go along with it. They vote for it. They're still supporting this party as we are being looted. The country's very structurally weak. There's nothing to be proud of in our system. It's 150 years out of date. It's designed around nobility. It's designed around kings. It's designed around this class of people, this corrupt class of people, the Prince Andrews of the world and the Jeffrey Epsteins of the world. Our system is designed around corruption. And Canadian people don't even seem to realize it. You've been getting ripped off. You don't have any real civil rights. Your charter can be suspended at the whim of this corrupt class. And you just love it because it's every single federal party supports this and doesn't want to change it. There is no proposal on the books by any federal party to do better for Canadians. They fiddle with the curtains while the house burns. No one's talking about systemic reform. No one's talking about returning the power to the people. They might say the words sometimes, but to do so would require saying things like, we need an elected Senate. We need to elect the Governor General. We need the right of recall for citizens. We need the right to include on the ballot direct democratic proposals. Create thresholds, do whatever you want, but for the ability of citizens to create or revoke laws, citizen nullification. These are all wonderful things. There's not a single person with the balls in Parliament to actually call for that. There's not even a person with the balls outside of Parliament that's trying to get in there with the chutzpah to actually call for those types of reforms. Back to the article, and at multiple points in the proposed Quebec Constitution, the document brazenly grants powers to Quebec that have only ever been retained by the federal government. This ranges from a clause that Quebec can ignore any international commitment or international agreement entered into by the federal government to a declaration that Quebec's lieutenant governor will henceforth be a Quebec-appointed officer of Quebec, unbound to either the crown or federal authority. The Quebec premier would also be given the power to pick Quebec's senators and Supreme Court judges, an authority that since 1867 has resided with the Prime Minister. The proposed constitution also steamrolls federal law, regarding the circumstances under which Quebec could ever seek full independence if it wanted to. Under the terms of the Federal Clarity Act, the only way to legally secede from Canada is to secure a clear majority in a separation referendum and then obtain the unanimous consent of the other 9 provinces. But the draft Quebec Constitution states that the Quebec people has, in fact and in law, the right to self-determination and specifies that any referendum on the subject needs only to secure 50% of the valid votes cast plus 1. Again, Quebec never signed on to the country. They are a volunteer participant. They can leave whenever they want. Again, I'm sorry to repeat myself, but the referendums were just a process of blackmail to make a portion of the country go along with giving more away to Quebec, this welfare system, this design of Canada. Nobody in the mainstream media is talking about this. This is a much more serious threat to Canada. If you're a Canada lover, this is a much more serious threat to our integrity as a nation, if you can even argue that that exists, than an Alberta referendum. But that's all the media wants to talk about, is the potential for a separatist movement in Alberta. And the big question to me is, first off, why doesn't anybody realize that this is the arrangement of the country, that Quebec is a volunteer participant? All they're saying here is they'll take back that voluntary power that they've given away to Canada. They'll take their ball and they'll leave. When? Again, I ask, when are the people of Alberta and Saskatchewan and the government of Alberta and Saskatchewan going to realize there's nothing here for us? The double standard is palpable. The double standard on its own should be enough to offend the sensibilities of everybody involved. But the fact of the matter is, Canada as an institution exists to oppose the prosperity and the wealth generation of the Western provinces. You've got Elizabeth May, drunken wine aunt that she is, once again saying over her dead body, there will never be tanker traffic coming into the West Coast. They're not going to build a pipeline for us. They're not going to have tanker traffic. They're all committed to net zero. Net zero is a recipe for the fall and decline of Western Canada. They want to mass immigrate people to this country that don't even have any money. They can't afford to buy housing here. They come here and they're in the same economic destitution that Canadians are. Even the ones that are getting those multi-$1,000 checks as refugees or under some other program, underneath it all, the vast majority are a new slave class that aren't helping anything. They're locking Canadians out of work, and they themselves are being abused by their employees or employers. And if they say anything, their papers get revoked and they get kicked out of the country. It's terrible for everybody. When is Alberta and Saskatchewan going to actually realize that there's only one way forward? And it's not cooperation with Ottawa. It's not negotiation. It's not slow rolling. Listen, Alberta just proposed a couple bills. One is Bill 9, which protects children from the madness of gender ideology, from the hormones that will sterilize them, from the surgeries that will mutilate them, from the parents who have abandoned their responsibility to protect their kids from harm. Alberta wants to keep these young people intact until they're older, until they're the age of majority. And if then they decide to mutilate themselves in pursuit of something they can never be, well, that's their decision. Another bill that the Alberta legislature is proposing is a protection of free speech. It's like, I think it's actually called colloquially the Jordan Peterson bill. And it talks about free speech, setting Alberta on a collision course with Ottawa, which is set to curtail free speech in an abundance of bills that I've covered on this channel already that are advancing because, once again, the Conservative Party, being weak, didn't bring the government down. Every kind of excuse in the book, oh, we need a little bit more time. Well, you've had 10 years and you haven't actually managed to pull anything off with your vaunted strategy. Instead, you voted for C5. That one blows my mind. With all the finagling and all the talk and rhetoric and everything else, when you peel it all away, C5 is just an attempt to put nooses around the provinces who signed Confederation, put nooses around their necks, and prevent them from exercising their provincial autonomy. And the Conservative Party was like, yeah, sure. This is a bill directly aimed at Alberta. Pierre Poilievre comes to Alberta, runs in a riding in Alberta, gets elected, and supports a bill that's deliberately targeting Alberta to keep her options limited. Now, you could say the Conservatives, once they get elected, they want that power for themselves. Well, that sucks because they won't be in power forever. We've learned that lesson throughout the course of history. We have to rely on another dictator from Ottawa because that's what they are, folks. This government that we're under right now, this cabinet, this governor general, they're dictators. This country is far more totalitarian than anybody wants to realize. Once you elect parliament, there's no accountability to you. Parliamentarians, pre-selected by the party system, are only there to rubber stamp the government into existence. And then they sit there like good little docile dogs and they vote however the whip tells them. This is Canada. It's not very good. It's not very modern. It's not very good for its citizens. But trying to convince people that they're in a prison where they can't see the bars, even though you can read about the bars, even though you can read about the pitfalls of the Constitution, and you can talk about the institutional weakness of the entire project, no one wants the details. No one wants to actually understand how bad a deal it is for them. They get taxed at source. They get taxed on tax. First you pay your income taxes, and then out of what's left, you got to pay your GST. You can't even make a claim about your property taxes. You're getting taxed on taxed everywhere. I saw an article last night. Regina is talking about a 12% property tax increase just to maintain the current level of services that the people of Regina are enjoying. It's a meme. Regina's a meme. The crime in Regina is a meme. It's a joke in Saskatchewan. They want 12% more just to keep it as it is. Addicts on public transit, NDP-run city. Where's the ROI for the Canadian citizen? Canada's being carved up, folks. We literally brought a central banker, Goldman Sachs man, Brookfield manager in who owns a ton of stock in the company, supposedly in a blind trust, but there's no such thing as a blind trust. It's just a legal thing. It's not blind. Conflict of interest, more conflicts of interest than you can count. He's prime minister. He's a fairly popular prime minister for some unknown reason to me. It's fascinating. And he's literally proceeding to carve up the country. And I look at the CPP. I've talked about the Canada Pension Plan before. This is a tax. This is a pre-tax tax. This is the first tax you will pay on your wages before your income taxes are assessed. It's the very first thing that comes out. And there are morons that'll probably show up in the comment section. Forgive me, a colloquial. There are morons that will probably show up on Twitter that watch this video and they'll say, the CPP is not a tax, man. It's a pension fund. It's savings. Already ruled by the court of tax. And you know why it's a tax? Because it takes 12%, close to 12%, it's 11.9% of your wage is taken from you before you pay income taxes. You might say it's not 12%, Frank. It's 6%. I've got my pay stub where you're taxed at source. You don't even get to touch the money before they take it away. Well, your employer's paying the other 6. So you only see 6, but the other 6 is coming out the back end where you don't. So you're not seeing your money two different ways. But if you're self-employed, of course, you understand it's 12% on the first 72,000, I think, that you make. Might be 79. Doesn't matter. You're getting scammed. You're getting ripped off. And the CPP is one of the most well-compensated organizations in the country. Here's a table. Admittedly, it's a few years old now. I don't even know. I've been meaning to dive into this in much greater detail. But I want you to look at the total compensation packages that these guys get. You got your base salary, you got your annual incentive, you got your long-term incentive allocation, you got your total direct compensation, your long-term incentive paid, other change in pension value, comes out the back end. Some of these people are getting paid millions of to manage this slush tax fund. And I've highlighted on this channel before how Brookfield, you see that sigh? It's like I get fatigued sometimes. I wonder what the point is. What's the point of telling this story? Is it going to lead to anything? Is it going to wake people up? Are the politicians, the ones that need to wake up the most, Scott Moe, Daniel Smith, are they going to come to understand how this country is set up? How it's a big ripoff? How you can't negotiate with Carney? You got to go to the next level? You got to start creating the political will and the public will to actually take back provincial autonomy and sovereignty? Because it's there, it's guaranteed. It's something that is your birthright. The provinces are supposed to be, as Quebec has highlighted, somewhat equal to the federal government. Bills like C5 just erode that provincial power. When are we going to start doing the hard work? Because these new bills, by the way, that Alberta is introducing, which are wonderful, they're great sounding bills, but they're going to conflict with federal law. That's why the notwithstanding clause had to be invoked on Bill 9, because the federal government wanted to quash it. It's going to be a fight forever if we don't start thinking outside the box. At any rate, back to the Canada Pension Plan. Brookfield Asset Management has at times in the past, when it has assets that it doesn't want to hold anymore, sold them to the Canada Pension Plan. What is the Canada Pension Plan? It's $650-700 billion in assets under management, 85% of which are held outside of Canada because not even the CPP wants to invest in Canada. Who wants to put money into this thing? It's like it's a prison. You stick your money in, you can't get it back out. You're overtaxed, you're overburdened. You got people calling for corporate tax hikes in Canada right now. The only reason we have any business left is because that hasn't happened yet. People treat corporations like they're the great big evil in the room. It is not them. It is government. It's government that is inflating your purchasing power away. It is government that is engaged in deficit spending. It is government that is blowing your money overseas on programs to buy condoms for people in Nigeria as if it even matters. It's your government that's running an $80 billion deficit this year before the crisis even starts. It's your government that parachuted in Mark Carney to head the Liberal Party in an election where 400,000 plus people were registered to vote and 250,000 didn't even get a chance to vote. An election where the only two real candidates, the only two minority candidates in the entire race, everybody else was white, were disallowed because they offered a real and concrete choice and they were bringing people in the door. In an election where the statistical improbabilities of the actual result are astronomical. The whole thing defies belief. And that was before the election where I genuinely believe the Canadian people made this parachuted man our prime minister. The only people who seem to understand what this is all about are Quebec and millions of people in Saskatchewan and Alberta and in other places. But the heart, the capital, the area of understanding that is the greatest is Western Canada. The people understand it's a rotten deal. 150 years of experience has demonstrated that it's not that great. So I ask again, Quebec shows the way. They are indicating the future. When they're done ripping Canada off, they will pull the plug on the entire thing, while the media and everybody else is focusing their outrage on Daniel Smith, who hasn't even gotten started yet. I wish you would. Quebec is preparing, and has always been preparing, to kill this country off. They're only here to take advantage of it. They figured it out. A large cohort of the population in Western Canada has figured it out. When will our leaders figure it out? Every single Canadian deserves a better deal, but most Canadians don't even understand they got a bad deal. Too busy watching hockey, too busy watching the Raptors, too busy tuned into baseball, too busy with nonsense. Weekend warriors getting drunk every single weekend, not paying attention to how they're being ripped off. They know that they're making a good wage. I mean, a top 3% wage can actually sit in their own self-pity and wonder why they're not getting ahead. That's a 3%er. And the answers are before us. I really hope that we stop pussyfooting around, we stop wasting our time, because that's what it is. All this negotiation, it's just delaying the inevitable.